Good morning and welcome to today's Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Use Services Minority Mental Health Awareness Month webinar about transgenerational trauma. Before we get started, here are a few reminders about the webinar. Please make sure you're using a computer or smartphone connected to the internet and the audio function is on and the volume is turned up. Please make sure your microphone is muted for the duration of the event unless you're asking a question. To ask questions, use the chat feature located on your control panel, and we will answer as many questions as time allows after the presentation. American Sign Language interpreters and closed captioning options are available for today's event. The American Sign Language interpreters for today are Susan King Lanier and Danette Steelman Bridges. For closed captioning options, select the closed caption feature located on your control panel. To adjust your video layout and screen view, select the view feature located in the top right-hand corner of your screen and choose the view that works best for you. Today's agenda begins with an introduction to transgenerational trauma and historical content. We will then discuss forms and mechanisms of transmission and the impact of race-based trauma and transgenerational trauma. This will be followed by a presentation on coping and healing, and then a Q&A session. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Scotty Jackson, Program Coordinator for the Office of People, Culture, and Belonging at the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services.
Good morning, everyone. My name, well, she already said it. Good morning, but I'd like to start by just thanking the Division of Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities and Substance Use Services for hosting this crucial event and for inviting me to speak today. I am the program coordinator for the Office of People, Culture, and Belonging at NCDHHS. Today, I'll provide a high-level overview of the work we do at OPCB and how it aligns with addressing transgenerational trauma. One of our core initiatives is managing DEI Council communication. And also, just a heads up, we are currently in the process of changing the name of DEI Councils to changing that name to Staff Engagement and Belonging Councils. But one of our core initiatives involves managing these councils and maintaining strong communications across over 30 different councils, which is crucial for ensuring that we are all aligned in building strong and inclusive workforce at NCDHHS. We also offer training programs designed to enhance a sense of belonging within the departments, and these trainings cover a range of topics such as unconscious bias, cultural humility, and best practices for successful communication. Our office is also involved in several collaborative work groups aimed at developing equitable solutions for North Carolinians. One of our latest work groups focuses on child behavioral health, where we have been instrumental in addressing equity issues involving youth. We also support the HBCU/MSI internship program. This is designed to provide opportunities for students from historically Black college universities and from minority serving institutions. And I've seen firsthand how this program has benefited the students and have had shown many success stories and testimonials from past interns. Currently, we are also launching the ERG across NCDHHS. ERGs are employee resource groups, and ERGs have been proven to help build a strong and inclusive workforce. They provide a platform for all employees to engage broadly across the department, fostering connections and community that supports widespread workplace belonging. Now, how does what we do connect with transgenerational trauma? So the work that we do, this is very significant issue that we need to address. Our efforts increase belonging in the workplace. This includes creating supportive environments that consider these mental health challenges. By integrating mental health awareness into our building belonging initiatives, we can better support North Carolinians and help to eradicate disparities in our great state. I encourage you all to actively participate in initiatives that promote belonging and inclusion within your departments or communities. There are practical steps and resources available for you all, and we are here to be able to help serve you and be able to offer those trainings for you if that's what you need. And thank you all for your attention. And again, thanks for the Division of Mental Health for hosting this event. Thank you all. I will now turn it over to Matt.
I'm on mute. Scotty, thank you so much for all the work that you all do to support us and other divisions in the department. I know we're having a really excellent experience with that internship program that you had talked about as well. So really appreciate all of those connections. So for folks who don't know me, good morning. I'm Matt Herr. I'm the Director for System Performance at the Division of Mental Health, DD, and Substance Use Services. And it is such a privilege and pleasure to be with you this morning. Now, each July, we honor author and advocate B.B. Moore Campbell by recognizing National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And this month is dedicated to raising awareness about the unique mental health challenges faced by minority communities and emphasizing the importance of accessible and culturally competent mental health care. Your mental health is a priority here at the division. If someone you love or you is experiencing a mental health crisis and needs support, you can call, text, or chat with 988. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available 24/7 to provide immediate crisis counseling when needed. We also have some peer support specialists. These are folks that callers have the option to speak to someone who has lived experience and recovery with mental health and or substance use disorders. And you can contact that peer warm line at 1-855-PEERS-NC. That's PEERS-NC or 1-855-733-7762. At this time, I will pass it to Brittany Jones. And thank you.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you for joining today's webinar on transgenerational trauma, sponsored by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council at the Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Use Services in honor of Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. My name is Brittany Jones, and I am the chair of the division's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. Today, you'll be hearing from me and a few other partners and speakers. I'm going to now turn it over to Badia Henderson so that she can introduce herself.
Thank you, Brittany. Yes, good morning. My name is Badia Henderson. I am the Communications Program Manager, and I also serve as the DEI Council Co-Chair for our division.
So we wanted to take time to acknowledge that we recognize that this topic can be heavy and feelings may come up for you around this topic throughout the presentation. Please know that you have the space to take care of yourself during this webinar. So, that means taking a moment and coming back, do whatever you need to do to ensure that you are well. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start off by talking about the definition of transgenerational trauma. So when you think about transgenerational trauma, it is also referred as intergenerational trauma. It's defined as trauma that is passed down from those who directly experience an incident to subsequent generations. There can be several factors involved, including personal trauma, trauma experienced by a specific cultural, racial, or ethnic group, or major historical events. And next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Badia to talk more about transgenerational trauma.
Thank you, Brittany. So transgenerational trauma can affect multiple generations. It can result from systemic oppression or historical patterns of mistreatment. These experiences can elicit a trauma response in individuals. Systemic oppression can manifest in the form of racial discrimination, economic disparities, lack of access to quality education, healthcare, and basic resources, and social stereotyping. Communities often face these challenges, including high levels of stress, violence, substance abuse, mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, and a lack of self-worth. This ongoing trauma hinders the well-being and development of individuals and communities, perpetuating a cycle that is difficult to break. Next slide.
So now we're going to turn it over to one of our interns who will be talking about the historical context of transgenerational trauma. Amber.
Sorry. Hi, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Amber Graves, and I am an intern here with the Department of Division of Mental Health. Sorry. So now I'm going to talk about the historical trauma. Historical trauma is a concept that describes psychological and emotional wounds experienced by marginalized groups of people due to major oppressive events that include slavery, the Holocaust, the Great Depression, colonization, and Stonewall riots. Slavery inflicted brutal violence, exploration, and systematic racism on African Americans, creating a deep and persistent trauma that continues to affect their descendants through ongoing racial discrimination and social economic disparities. The Holocaust caused profound suffering for Jewish communities, with the trauma of genocide and loss passed down through generations. The Great Depression left a legacy of economic hardship and instability that affected countless families, with its trauma influencing future generations through poverty, unemployment, and economic fear. Colonization inflicted systematic violence, cultural erasure, and displacement among indigenous populations, creating a cycle of trauma that persists across generations. And the Stonewall riots marked a pivotal moment for the fight for LGBTQ plus communities' rights, with the collective trauma of police violence and discrimination sparking a movement for justice. Next slide, please. So here's a slide I'm going to explain about how the transgenerational trauma affected African American populations. First, slavery from 1619 to 1865. Africans and African Americans were used for domestic labor in the United States against their will. Then we move on to sharecropping in the 1870s. Black families would rent small plots of land or shares to work for themselves. In return, they will give a portion of their crops to their landowners at the end of the year. Then we move on to Jim Crow and segregation from 1877 to the 1950s. Laws enforced racial segregation in the American South. The term separated but equal was used, but many things were less than equal. Then in the 1980s, we have the crack epidemic. The significant increase in the use of crack cocaine or crack in the United States during the early 1980s. And now we have mass incarceration from 1980s to currently. Despite making up close to 5% of the global population, the United States has more than 20% of the world's prison population. Next slide. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Brittany.
Thank you, Amber. So we're just going to take a quick polling question. So you should see a pop-up on your screen. So just let us know, what are some important things to address in transgenerational trauma for transgenerational trauma in your communities? So I think you can click multiple answers, but just tell us what things come to mind when addressing transgenerational trauma for you.
And we'll give everyone a few more seconds, and then we'll close the poll.
So it looks like about equally for everything: access to mental health for providers who look like you, awareness and education, support of cultural healing practices, and advocacy and social change were about equally the things that came to mind when addressing transgenerational trauma. Awesome. Next slide, please. So on the slide, you'll see the cover of Ernest Green's Green Book. So the Green Book was published in 1936. Initially, it pointed out African American friendly restaurants and hotels in New York, but it eventually expanded to include everything from lodging and gas stations to tailor shops and doctors' offices across the nation, as well as in Bermuda and Mexico and Canada. It was used as a travel guide for that to point to safe havens for African Americans where they could eat and stay. It was one of the survival tools that was utilized, for example, for African Americans in the segregated life. This slide also shows a map of the US where there were sundown towns. And sundown towns were communities within the United States in which African Americans were not welcome. So these towns openly discriminated against Black residents and visitors, and violence was also a common tactic. So this slide is just to provide a little bit more of that historical context of, the trauma that African Americans lived in during the Jim Crow era. So we're gonna get into later on about like the transmissions and forms of like how transgenerational trauma is passed down and how it materializes. So I'm gonna turn it over to, sorry, next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to two of our members of the DEI Council, Tamara Smith and Angela Harper King, to talk more about the forms and mechanisms of transmission of transgenerational trauma.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tamara. So I want to begin by talking about interpersonal racism, which is a form. And interpersonal racism is racism that occurs between individuals. These are acts that we hear about in the media. There will be examples such as hate crimes, an act that is a job or housing discrimination, racial profiling, and even violence by a police officer towards a person of color. I do want you to keep in mind that not every act of interpersonal racism is visible. There's harassment, discrimination, and even microaggressions. And these are defined as indirect, subtle, and even unintentional discrimination against members of marginalized groups, yet they still have very lasting impacts on the minorities. So microaggressions are, again, those actions that are negatively targeting marginalized groups or individuals. And it's a form of discrimination that can be intentional or accidental. And if you view the slide, there's examples of some very common ones, and I won't get into reading all those for you. And another example of interpersonal relationship is discrimination. And that is what we know to be is unfair or prejudicial treatment of people of color, and it is based on characteristics such as one's race, gender, age, or sexual orientation. Minorities face these microaggressions, both verbal as well as nonverbal, almost daily. A prime example would be Asian Americans and Latino Americans that are presumed to be foreign-born, yet they're US citizens. There's also something called offending others without really trying to. And examples are if you say someone's an Indian giver, or if you say you people. Microaggressions do fall into 3 different categories, and I want to talk about each of those briefly. There's the micro assaults, micro insults, and then there's micro invalidations. Your micro assaults are their conscious, they're intentional, but they're discriminatory actions. And this is examples of when you're using racial labels, when people display white supremacy symbols, even telling a racist joke and then saying that I was just joking. Your micro insults, these are going to be verbal, nonverbal, but also can be environmental communications. They're more subtle, they convey rudeness and insensitivity, but they demean a person's racial heritage or their identity. So examples of this would be, one particular is, example, if a coworker is speaking to someone that is a person of color and they asked he or she how him or her got their job. And they're implying that he or she may have landed it through affirmative action or quota system. And last, there's what you call invalidations. And this is when a person's comment can invalidate or undermine the experiences of marginalized groups. And an example of this would be a white person telling a Black person that racism does not exist in today's society, when we know that that is not the case. That's not true. There's also an example of racial microaggressions, and this is very brief, but everyday insults. They're belittling messages, and they're sent to people of color by well-intended white people, but they have hidden messages, and people are very unaware of what those messages are as they're communicating them. So I've got a short video clip that I want to show an example from, and it's from the movie Green Book. And I really want you to kind of pay attention to the nonverbal actions of both individuals in this clip. And so I think that's a very good example of something that can be people are not aware of that they're doing, but it's also a discrimination. And so I want to talk the second form about is something called structural racism. And structural racism and discrimination together, what you may hear sometimes referred to as SRD, they occur at the macro level. And this is more when you have racial segregation and institutional policies. And they limit the opportunities, the resources, the power, and the well-being of individuals and populations based on race, ethnicity, and other statuses. So structural and systemic racism harms both mental and physical health of individuals of color. And you'll hear more about individuals of color and how trauma affects people. But I do want everybody to kind of understand that the different forms of systemic oppression, including discrimination and exploitative practices, can be very traumatic. So systemic oppression is socially constructed, but there is a belief that some groups in society are less valuable than other groups, and it's because they're attached to a specific category, such as their gender, their sexual orientation, religion, race, or their age. And I found something very interesting, which is the systemic oppression or the cycle of oppression. And it shows how oppression operates in this cycle, that it links the stereotypes, prejudice, discrimination, and internalized oppression into categories. And it goes round and round, and it creates this system that discriminates against some groups to benefit other groups. And systemic and structural racism are forms of racism that are very pervasive, and are deeply embedded and even what we call codified into our operating practices and procedures, our written as well as our unwritten policies, and even our laws. One common example I know some of you have probably heard about is declaring certain types of hairstyles unprofessional. Historically, this has been something that has restricted qualified Black candidates from gainful employment. And in 2019, there was something introduced called Crown Act into Congress, and that's creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. And with the Crown Act, for the 55 states that have got one, it is the law that prohibits discrimination, and it's based on hair texture or style. And I do want to indicate, though, there are still employers that do have restrictions on hair, particularly dreadlocks and natural hair. But Blacks as well as brown people face this type of racial discrimination based on hair texture. So while we've had a lot of progress in this area, racial-based hair discrimination still remains a systemic problem in the workplace. And we have a polling question, and then Angela will also be able to talk to us a little bit more first about the psychological or the physiological and the biological mechanisms of trauma.
So our next polling question is, what percentage of Americans do not believe that systemic racism exists in the U.S.? We'll give a few more seconds and pull that down. So the correct answer was 40%. And it looks like we averaged about 65% being the highest one. Next slide.
Good morning. I'm going to start with talking about psychological mechanisms. As humans, we desire to be close to each other. Attachment is just as important to a child as the desire to eat. It has been determined that the attachment bond developed between a child and caregiver is a lasting psychological connection. The attachment bond provides a child with an understanding of self, what is considered good, safe, and just as important, what is considered bad, dangerous in the world. When a caregiver is consistent in meeting the child's emotional and psychological needs, the child tends to develop a secure attachment. When these needs are not met, an insecure attachment style is developed. And looking at the diagram, top left, you see attachment, secure attachment style. The child feels safe. And as an adult, you will most likely see a person with confidence, high self-esteem. Top right, ambivalence attachment. The caregiver was inconsistent, on again, off again, hot and cold. The child is cautious of strangers. When they grow older, they self-reliant. I take care of it myself. Bottom left, avoidant attachment. The caregiver was emotionally unavailable, rejecting or just neglectful of the child. The child may avoid a caretaker. Bottom right, disorder attachment. This child seems confused, and looking at the child, they may even look dazed, show a lack of clear attachment behavior. These responses to the caregiver may often be mixed, avoidant or resistant. It's important to note that children can tell family stories before they even gain speech. A child mirrors what they see from their caregiver. Next slide, please. Studies on family narrative sharing and young adults provide evidence to show adolescents who know more about their family history tends to have less anxiety, higher self-esteem, better family functioning, and just fewer behavioral problems. The passing down of family stories and narratives is important in every culture and religion, and it can be significant throughout one's life. Likewise, in African American communities, storytelling plays a vital role. It provides a voice to those who may feel their voice is not valued in society. It's a portal for teaching those life lessons, sharing aspirations, and means for preserving those significant events, and gives a sense of cultural belonging. If you think about it, dreams and aspirations from 1950s and 60s are still important. What made Dr. Martin Luther King's speech, "I Have a Dream," so powerful, so important that even now, young children are asked to recite the speech? Dr. King envisioned a new reality that reflects our current ideal. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by their character. Next slide, please. Biological mechanisms, epigenetics is an evolving area of research that shows how high levels of stress, those environmental influences, can actually affect whether and how genes are expressed. That is, how genes are turned on and off. And even if some genes are expressed at all without changing their DNA sequence. So in turn, it affects how genes releases instructions. Future capacity to health, learning, and resilience can all be affected. Next slide. Research has found a connection between parental trauma that cause epigenetic modifications with the exposed parent and their offspring. Environmental factors can alter genes that are inherited, and those factors can be positive as well as negative. Now, it used to be said our genes are set in stone. What we receive at birth, we have. And the old argument, which is more significant, nature versus nurture, is really no debate anymore, because most of the time it's both. Medical disadvantages that are environmentally induced requires access to good, sound medical and psychiatric care to address profound disparities in health, such as hypertension, diabetes, lung, kidney, and cardiovascular diseases, which can lead to heart attacks, strokes, and premature death. Considering this, intentional efforts like North Carolina Medicaid expansion are vital. Yes, it was well worth the fight. Next slide. The Tuskegee study, some just call it the experiment. To be cautious of time, please jump to the video, and then I will come back.
In July of 1972, the Washington Star newspaper broke the story about the controversial Tuskegee Institute syphilis experiment. For 40 years, from 1932 until 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service, in partnership with Tuskegee, secretly studied the effects of untreated syphilis in African-American men in Alabama. 600 black men, 399 with syphilis and 201 without the disease, were induced to participate in the experiment. Nearly all of them were poorly educated, impoverished sharecroppers. In exchange for participating, they were promised free medical exams, hot meals, and a burial stipend. The men with syphilis were not told they were infected and were not treated, even after penicillin was discovered to be an effective cure for the disease in the 1940s. Over the course of the experiment, 128 participants died of syphilis or syphilis-related complications. In 1972, when the paper exposed the details, the experiment was still ongoing. It incited public outrage over the unethical treatment of the participants, which led to the experiment's termination that November. The following year, the NAACP filed suit on behalf of the survivors. The federal government settled the lawsuit for $10 million. It also agreed to provide survivors and their infected family members with free medical services.
Thank you for that. You can end that video. In closing, I just wanted to say this is critical because this is a real traumatic event. Fuel mistrust of medical system, science, and government. That's why it was critical that North Carolina got it right during COVID-19. Gaining informed consent, providing accessible, accurate information that target those most in need, that has those underlying health conditions. This is real stuff. I really appreciate your time on today. And at this time, I will transition to Michelle Strobel. She's going to discuss impact of race-based trauma and the transgenerational trauma. Michelle?
Thank you, Angela. Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle Strobel. I am a regional manager for Innovations IDD Care Management at Partners Health Management. Let me just first give a brief description of myself. I am middle-aged, Caucasian, was assigned female at birth, and use they, she pronouns. I have medium-length, straight brown hair and sport black, thick-rimmed glasses. I'm wearing a white button-down shirt with a collar and pink stripes today. As a self-proclaimed healthcare disruptor, I am both humbled and honored to be presenting with this panel of amazing speakers, having conversations about this very, very important topic. Today, I'm going to be discussing the impacts of race-based and transgenerational trauma. Race-based trauma and transgenerational trauma represent profound and enduring legacies that really have shaped individuals and communities across generations. As you have already learned today, these forms of trauma are deeply rooted in historical injustice and systemic discrimination. They manifest in diverse ways, affecting mental health and social dynamics and overall well-being. I'm going to start first with some of those impacts on mental health. So our brains, they're amazing. They are the control centers of our whole body, and they make us who we are. For people who have experienced race-based or intergenerational trauma, it can feel like they are fighting a constant battle with their brain. When you are experiencing traumatic events, there are 3 specific areas of your brain that are impacted. Those are the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex. So our amygdala, the job of our amygdala is really to help control our emotions, our survival instincts. So this is the area of the brain that is responsible for our fight-flight response. And for some people who have experienced trauma, the amygdala can become hyperactive, making them intensely aware of everything around them. Now, this is the brain's way of making sure that a person can get away from people, places, events that might cause them harm. However, it makes it very difficult for someone to relax, sleep, and find joy in outside activities if it stays hyper alert. In our hippocampus, this is the area of the brain that helps us with our learning and our memory. And studies have shown that people who experience traumatic events have a smaller hippocampus than those who haven't. So the impact here is that people who have experienced trauma may have a hard time forming memories, but may have really vivid memories of those race-based traumas that they have experienced. With the prefrontal cortex, this is the part of the brain that is responsible for regulating our emotions. So for people who have not experienced significant traumas, their prefrontal cortex is going to signal their amygdala that certain situations, people are safe. So if a person has experienced trauma, then their prefrontal cortex is not going to allow them to have that real sense of safety, right? So what does this all mean? Individuals who are experiencing race-based trauma often suffer from symptoms that are very similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. For example, that emotional dysregulation, sleep disturbances, sometimes substance use issues, intrusive thoughts, numbing, self-harm. And for people who have experienced this race-based trauma, or those who are experiencing the intergenerational trauma, their brains have developed this maladaptive way that really is trying to help keep them safe. They're becoming hyper aware of their surroundings and their feelings, and they often perceive that most situations are dangerous and not safe. Next slide. So race-based and transgenerational trauma profoundly impacts not only the mind and the spirit, but also just infiltrates very deeply into physical health. And I know we got a little bit of an insight to some of the physical health with some of the slides earlier, but I really want to just bring in this interconnected, right, between those historical wounds and present day well-being. So what we are seeing is, people who are impacted by race-based trauma or carrying transgenerational trauma often live in a state of chronic stress. So this stress response, if prolonged, can dysregulate your body's hormonal systems, right? So, and it can lead to very elevated levels of cortisol and adrenaline that contribute to situations, conditions such as hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and metabolic disorders like diabetes. This chronic stress that is also linked to transgenerational trauma is linked to a higher risk of cardiovascular disease, including hypertension, elevated blood pressure, elevated heart rate, and inflammation within those blood vessels. We also see that the prolonged stress can weaken immune systems, making people more susceptible to infections and illness. This is due to that suppressive effect of stress hormone on immune function. And it really impairs our body's ability to fight off pathogens. So additionally, what we're seeing when it comes to health is people who have experienced race-based trauma may also face barriers in accessing good health care, accessing preventative service, which also farther compromises their immune health. We also see an increase in pain and chronic conditions such as headaches, back pain, musculoskeletal diseases, and all of these really just kind of escalate that kind of chronic pain syndromes that we're seeing. So transgenerational trauma, when we think about people who are carrying that, this lots of times can manifest in somatic symptoms and conditions where our body is feeling physically ill. And when we think about, the race-based trauma and the transgenerational trauma, these contribute to those long-term health disparities that we've been talking about as well. So both socioeconomic factors and the cumulative effects of stress and trauma on health over generations are driving these disparities that we're talking about. Next slide. So I want to take a moment and just really think about the intersection of where like BIPOC heritage and LGBTQ plus identities intertwine. When we look at this, we're really revealing complex layers of race-based and intergenerational trauma that are shaping resiliency and identity in these populations. So members of the LGBTQ plus community has faced trauma spreading from, as you heard earlier, the 1969 Stonewall riots to the Pulse nightclub shooting that happened in 2026, all the way up to our current political temperature and the legislative climate. Not to mention that higher rates of violence are experienced by this group. So, for example, in 2023, it was reported that 9 in 10, or 90%, of trans and gender nonconforming victims of violence were people of color. So most all of us are aware of the discrimination that belongs to the LGBTQ plus community and that people of color face. However, lots of times we don't pause to realize that the compounded life challenges that are faced when someone is a part of both of these communities, that really drives a lot of some of the traumas and barriers and mental health access and physical health access that we're seeing. So some of the things that we're seeing when we have these societal challenges for people of color who also belong to the LGBTQ community, they see this intersection, right, of where prejudice and marginalization is based on both race and their sexual orientation. And this leads to heightened experiences of exclusion, invisibility, those microaggressions, both not only within their own racial or ethnic communities, but also within the LGBTQ plus spaces. We have also seen historically erasure of these communities, and this comes through denial, right? Like refusing to acknowledge that these communities even exist or the intersectionality of these communities, along with the exclusion. So lots of times members that find themselves in both of these communities find that they have a heightened stigma, not only from their racial ethnic communities, but also from those LGBTQ spaces. We also see that they have, more mental health issues such as PTSD, and they find it very challenging to find spaces where they feel safe and accepted. And when you are a member of both of these communities, you face barriers to accessing culturally competent mental health care services, physical health care services, and support networks. And there's also the family and community rejection that can come from this. And this rejection in itself, really heightens those feelings of isolation and contributes to a sense of alienation from one's own culture, heritage, or identity. So understanding this intersectionality is really crucial, and it is vital towards a journey of empathy and healing, which we're getting ready to explore, and then also justice. So before we turn it over to our next speaker, let's do another quick poll or knowledge check. So here's our polling question. What percentage of trans and gender nonconforming victims of violence are people of color? Give everybody a moment to respond. All right, very good. So the answer to this question was 90. So in 2003, it was reported that 9 in 10, so 90% of trans and gender nonconforming victims of violence were people of color. Of that, 85% of these victims were killed, and sadly, almost 2/3 of them were Black trans women. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Rachel, who is going to give us our next topic.
As we think about this toll that transgenerational and historical trauma has taken on people, takes on their physical health, takes on their mental health, I think that it's important to recognize that many of those people, those strong survival instincts that let them live through trauma and live with the issues they inherited from the history of slavery, from colonialism, from economic exploitation. They then tried to protect the next generation in ways that could have actually transmitted trauma because they themselves were in that survival mode, fight, flight, freeze. And sometimes in order to protect the next generation, they were doing things that actually perpetuated the trauma. Like Angela was talking about in terms of attachment styles. And so when we're thinking about healing, it can be helpful to think about reparenting as a strategy for healing. So I'm going to talk about some reparenting strategies to address the transmission of transgenerational trauma. And next slide, please. These are strategies that fall under the concept of reparenting that is from interfamily systems work. And this particular material is really dependent on the work of Leslie Priscilla, who does an amazing job talking about healing through a reparenting. And that she thinks of those big pillars that hold up the tent of reparenting. The first one being comfort, that if we have experienced trauma, often passed on to us by parents or other generations who were trying to protect us. So a family that rejected our expression of sexuality because they thought it would be dangerous out in the world, or a parent who was concerned about how our actions would be received by the dominant culture and tried to teach us to speak a different way or act a different way because they thought it would protect us, but instead felt rejecting, felt like we weren't being appreciated or valued. That one of the pillars is comfort, helping our inner child feel nurtured and safe. Another is autonomy, giving yourself the freedom to meet your own needs at your own pace, because healing can only happen on our timeline. And part of slavery and part of colonialism was that we historically did not have control of our time, that people were forced to labor for other people, that their only value was being productive, that we are human beings, not human doings, and that when we can have control of our time and have autonomy over our decisions, that's part of the healing process. Next slide. Two other pillars are having space for joy and playfulness, having a chance to really laugh and be youthful, that often, because of transgenerational trauma, parents passed on a fear of us being childish. They wanted us to be adult. They wanted us to take on adult roles in the home so that they could go out and work, or to be out in the community taking care of things in a very adult way. And that was to protect us, to make sure that we had value, so that somebody who was only valuing us for our labor was able to see value in us and not think of us as disposable. But as a result, many of us didn't have enough space for just play and silliness. Another way that reparenting can support us is through recognizing that we need that balance between work and rest, between time that's focused on being productive and time that's focused on nurturance and self-care and family and relaxation, and that creating structure where there's space for both things can help us in our reparenting process. Next slide. Listening and holding space is key to reparenting. Being able to have a person, a listening ear, where they say, I got you, finding your people, finding your sounding boards so that you're not just holding it all in. Discipline and loving accountability. This is not just having somebody else hold us accountable. It's finding our own rhythms where we hold ourselves accountable, where we're making sure we put ourselves to bed when we're tired instead of scrolling on social media, where we're making sure that we're giving our bodies nourishment and not just pushing through and walking through, that finding our ability to gently align ourselves with what we need instead of pushing ourselves past the breaking point. And 2 final pillars, next slide, please. Creating a community of care that if our families of origin are creating extra stress for us and we're feeling like we don't belong or rejected, making sure we create a chosen family, our play kin who can help us in moments of stress and in moments of joy to feel that we are surrounded and celebrated. And then creating boundaries. Sometimes we think of self-care being about having a bubble bath or a massage or a chance to walk outdoors, but self-care is really about boundaries, being able to say no. I can't take on that extra task. I can't do that extra thing. This is my self-care, being able to say, that's a great thing, and I can't do that for you. And knowing that our culture, particularly, I want to say Latinx culture, which is collectivistic and focused on our whole family, sometimes it can be really hard to set that boundary and say, I'm not coming to that celebration. I can't take care of the family in that way. I need these resources for something else. And that setting those boundaries can be part of a healing process. So if these are our pillars of reparenting, let's talk about what that might look like in some ways that we could do things a little differently. Next slide. So if you think that your inner child, that part of you that was forced to maybe grow up too soon, take on too many responsibilities, was being protected from the outer world by some harsh words from within your family, has been injured, you could write a letter to your inner child and just let it know that you recognize these harms that were done and you're really hoping to help build them up. Or maybe you want to just speak to your inner child, hanging up some photos of yourself as a young child and speaking directly to that photo, asking your inner child, what do you need right now? Recognizing that when we're activated into that fight, flight, freeze mode, there may be some inner cues that are going on that you can notice. Maybe your heart beats fast, maybe your shoulders show the stress, maybe you feel it in your neck. I know for me, my throat gets tight and I feel a little nauseous. Starting to recognize those physical cues that your inner child is not getting its needs met, and maybe writing them down or practicing a strategy that works for you and that helps relax your body and slow your breathing. Maybe that's counting backwards or walking around or listening to music. For a lot of people, it can be taking a sip of water, because when our mouth gets wet, it helps our parasympathetic nervous system kick into gear. Giving your inner child some affirmations, reminders from your inner parent. I'm so proud of you. All your feelings are okay to feel. You are safe right now. Together, we can get through this. Next slide, please. Other ways to heal through reparenting can be celebrating when you notice you acted from your loving inner parent. So I talked earlier about putting yourself to bed instead of scrolling through Facebook. And when you do those little things that are helping you to take care of your body and your mind now, instead of indulging in things that might feel good for a moment, but aren't actually addressing what your body needs in terms of nutrition, movement, rest. When your loving inner parent steps up and does those things, celebrate yourself. Give yourself a little reward. It is really important to create a community that really supports you, whether that's because are finding your family of origin creates additional stress, or there are parts of yourself that they can't accept, or parts you don't feel safe sharing. Finding a consistent, supportive community, we heal in relationship, and it can remind you to bring out your inner loving parent, and it can be there for you in moments of stress and need. As we move to parent the next generation, how do we avoid passing on the transgenerational trauma that we've received? We can do this through repairing our parenting strategies. One way is to practice reciprocal biculturalism, that we can look at what we know to be true for ourselves, the culture we've inherited, the things that we love, the things that really work for us. There may be celebrations. It may be that focus on familismo, on family. It may be valuing the personalismo and time together and lots of touches. And maybe the next generation is more goal-oriented or a little more individualistic, less focused on how can I do this for my family, and a little more on this is the goals I have for myself and my own journey. Maybe they have absorbed different comfort with different celebrations, more Americanized than the generation before. And that by trying to understand both things can be true and understand the other person's point of view, and to accept that the next generation is going to have both American cultural aspects and heritage cultural aspects that move forward and look different than maybe the heritage that we grew up with. That mutual understanding, which can happen in therapy or can happen by really trying to validate and understand before we suggest, can be really powerful. There's other things that can help for little ones who've been through trauma, and that can include that trauma they've inherited. There's a model called attachment by behavioral catch-up that intentionally helps parents nurture when children are hurt, instead of encouraging children to tough it out. It's not a big deal, which I think are the messages from colonialism and enslavement. Don't feel your own pain, just move forward and do what you need to do. Attachment by behavioral catch-up helps parents learn to respond to cries for help with nurturance, to show delight in their children, and to follow their lead. Ways that helps children feel their autonomy, recognize that their feelings are important, that they're important, and learn to self-regulate and take care of themselves. Next slide, please. So if you decided reparenting would help you heal from a trauma passed down to you, what is a step that you might choose to take? And you can choose as many as you want.
We'll give everyone a few seconds and then we'll close the poll.
And I know for some of us, this feels a little woo-woo. This feels a little corny to hang up a picture and talk to your picture. And you have to find the one that sits right for you, that's going to help you to address the things that have come down to you and feel prepared to not pass them on to the next generation. Okay, let's share the poll results. It looks like the hanging up the photo, it is a little too woo-woo for everybody. And that the most popular strategy is really recognizing what's going on physically in your body, learning to track that so that you can then figure out strategies that can help you self-regulate, and building up that supportive community and learning strategies that help you not pass on trauma to the next generation. Next slide, please. Perhaps you're not a parent and you're looking for strategies that can help with this with a coworker, with a friend, with a client who's in therapy with you, with a person in your network. And that to heal from invisible wounds, there are lots of things we can do in small, small places. So one of the things is to counteract devaluation. That, like I said, slavery and colonialism both say you're valuable because you do things, not because of who you are. So helping people see their value, recognize what we see as their strengths and their capacity to give, inviting them to feel powerful by giving them things that they can do. That's not like I need you to do, but it sounds like maybe you want to do this thing or that thing. And then if we do have requests or challenges for people who are in healing, to first start with validation, recognizing the harms that have been done to them, recognizing the fullness of the plate, recognizing the overwhelm that comes from having inherited this trauma, before we say, what if this is also true? And could we try this? Validate, then challenge, then request. VCR for those of you who are of that generation. How do we help people restore themselves? Help them to see the parts of themselves that you appreciate. Really be clear with those specific acknowledgement of people's strengths. Recognize that as people learn to speak up, if they have been made voiceless in the past because of racism and traumatizing history, that those voices that initially come out, they're rough, they're raw, and they may include profanity, they may include things being in rough draft. And so trying to make sure that we give people a chance to not feel like they have to be policed by us in their tone or the way they're expressing things, giving them a space to put things out there. Humanizing losses, recognizing that this is a lot. It's a lot to have a legislature try and say that you can't play a sport. It's a lot to have a legislature say that your history can't be in schools, and that acknowledging that the personal toll those things take, and not just saying, oh yeah, that government's crazy, to recognize it's taking something from somebody and to be there for that. To recognize that the reasonable response to the indignities and disrespect that is happening is rage. Anger is a response to an individual moment. Rage is a response to a systemic policies and government that aren't meeting your needs, and helping people to rechannel rage, to use that energy and power from rage in ways that is going to help change systems, helping them to connect to activism and communities, instead of feeling like the only way to express their rage is something that could harm them or other people around them. Positive cultural experiences are incredibly protective. Making space for singing the Martin Luther King version of Happy Birthday, not Martin Luther King, sorry. Oh my goodness. The Stevie Wonder version of Happy Birthday, making space to go to a fiesta, making space to put on the music of your culture, that cultural experiences and being around people in our culture and feeling understood really helps protect us from some of the intergenerational trauma that can be passed down to us. And that those relationships that we create, where people feel really understood and heard, can be very, very healing. And that if you can be that space for somebody where you're creating a true, honest, open relationship, that's a definite way that you can help people cope with historical and intergenerational trauma. Next slide. I want you to think of one thing that you could do to support somebody else in coping with the invisible wounds that they may be living with. You can pick whichever one you feel like you could be there for. I have used all of my time, but I hope that you leave with a strategy that you feel that you could use in your own family, or to support another family, or to support somebody else in your circle. And I'm going to pass it back to Brittany Jones.
Thank you. And the results are being shared. So it looks like positive cultural experiences was something that, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't scroll down. Promoting relational connectedness was one of the top things that people said that they could implement. So that's awesome. So this webinar provided a comprehensive framework for exploring transgenerational trauma, covering its causes, mechanisms, impacts, and path to healing. Healing transgenerational trauma can break the cycle of trauma transmission, ensuring future generations are not impacted by unresolved issues of their ancestors. This leads to a healthier, more resilient individual who can positively impact their families and subsequently build healthier communities. Addressing transgenerational trauma is essential for creating a more just, equitable, and healthy society. By recognizing and addressing the deep-seated impacts of transgenerational trauma, we can pave the way for a future where individuals and communities are empowered, resilient, and thriving. Next slide, please. So we'll now take questions, any questions from the audience. You can either use the raise the hand feature, or you can put your questions in the chat and we'll address any questions that you have at this time. So this, I see this question in the chat about, will there be a certificate for attendance? So there won't be a certificate of attendance, but we will provide the slides and a copy of the recording. It will be on the Empower our website, the Community Engagement and Training webpage, which is in the chat, and we'll repost that webpage in the chat for you guys.
We have another question asking, will you take this presentation to a wider audience?
Possibly. I think, given the opportunity, absolutely. And, we wanted to present this and, be mindful of everybody's time and day, because I know we have other things and places and things to be doing, but we thought this was an important topic to fit into, especially in July for Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. So I see, I've saw some feedback throughout the training too, about this presentation was well thought out and had covered a large subject. So great job to everyone. So, oh, sorry, go ahead, Padilla.
No, I was just going to say we will definitely look into maybe providing certificates for future webinars, and thank you for that.
So,
and feel free to raise your hand. This is a safe space. If you want to raise your hand and ask any questions, we still have about 15 minutes left.
I want to respond to something I saw in the chat that Carolina wrote about wanting to talk more about the mental health needs related to immigration and language, and that is a big piece of what El Futuro does. And if you'd like to connect more, you can follow up with me, or you can look on the El Futuro website, because focusing on the mental health needs of Latina communities is really a big piece of what El Futuro is there for, both doing the work in our clinic and then providing support to professionals who want to be more culturally responsive in the work they do in Latina communities.
So we have a little bit of time for questions. So I'm gonna just pose, oh, I'm sorry, I see a hand raised. Ashley Benton.
I see someone else was trying to raise their hand previously, Robert Henderson, but he's unable
Oh,
to unmute his microphone.
okay.
Hello, this is Ashley. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Signing. I appreciated you talking about LGBTQIA community and their generational trauma that they experience as well as people of color. And I'm not sure if you're aware of deaf people having discrimination against. The Milan Conference really influenced oralism and supported that, and they wanted people to stop using sign language and only use their voice to communicate. That was a really tragic event in history that happened against the deaf community. And also, cochlear implants are an issue culturally, and it has affected us generationally. It's almost like a genocide that's happening with deafness. We have discrimination in our own families. 90% of deaf individuals are born to parents that are hearing and use their voices to communicate. And they tend to try to teach their children to talk, even though they are deaf and might not have the ability to do so. I just wanted to share with you as well that there are another set of community members that experience colonism and discrimination, being a minority group as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, sharing that, Ashley. I think that that's important to highlight that, you know, in this presentation, we highlighted a few of the minority groups, but there are many more minority groups that are affected by the same kind of trauma and things that have happened to them. So I appreciate you, you sharing that, Ashley. And I just saw that in the chat too of included. And so that's something that we can incorporate too as the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Council, including in the future presentations, other populations and other groups to include and highlight for sure. So as we are kind of wrapping up, and I was going to pose the question of, you know, how can resiliencies of these different communities be maximized to address transgenerational trauma? I was going to pose that as a question that maybe, you know, if someone wants to chime in and answer as they're thinking about that.
Did any of the panelists want to chime in on that one as well? I don't see any more questions coming in at this time, Brittany, so I think we can go ahead and get ready to close out.
Absolutely. We want to thank you all for attending today's Minority Mental Health Awareness Month webinar on transgenerational trauma. The recording and presentation slides for today's event will be posted on our community engagement and training webpage. The links are included in the chat box, and there will be a brief survey following today's webinar, and we would really appreciate your time and taking the time out to complete it. So I'll let you have a moment to do the QR codes if you want to join our mailing list, join any of our side-by-side webinars, or join our advisory committees. But we thank you for attending again, and we hope you have a great day, rest of your day on purpose, and take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.